Hi guys, this is the Idaho Picker with a logical news update. And, the whole government shutdown thing's been going on. I ran across an article that thought I would read to you. It lays out some things that are pretty interesting and seem to fit into what their plan may be. Now understand that this Democrat versus Republican versus the president, this is all a stage. It's all planned. It's all they know exactly what they're doing, and they have a goal for this. You could look at what's going on as a false flag attack. Okay, if they continue to allow this shutdown to continue, they have some plans. They're going to punish the people, and this article goes into that. It says Obama ready to shut down 16 U.S. states. Okay, so let's come on down here and take a look at this article. It's very interesting, so I would suggest hanging in here. It says, it has never happened before in the history of the United States. We the people are watching a political game of chess unfold from our nation's leaders and are on the very brink of a financial catastrophe like no other since the nation's founding. When and if this occurs in just a mere 11 days on October 17th, President Obama is not looking to fix it, but rather shut down or terminate the charter of 16 U.S. states. The train wreck that was predicted with the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, is being scheduled. Our national debt clock is ticking down like a time bomb. October 17th, for the first time in U.S. history, we may default on our loans. Not a joke. October 17th is when the check to the outstanding accounts that we borrowed from to fund our Federal Reserve comes due to countries like China, who President Obama borrowed over $1 trillion from. It says, imagine, if you will, the sequence of events would likely go as follows. Within seconds of the news that the United States missed a payment, almost simultaneously the stock market and the U.S. dollar would plummet in value. A super spike in interest rates would follow in short order. A gallon of milk would suddenly cost upwards of $100. A loaf of bread, $44. A gallon of gasoline, upward of $1,000. In a panic to protect their inventories, business owners would shutter their doors, triggering a widespread looting and chaos. Then within an hour later, the federal government would issue emergency notification that its disaster map is in effect. The United States of America would look dramatically different, says renowned global analyst Kareem, whatever his last name is, adding that not every state will survive. I'm going to come on down here. I want to read some more. There's a lot of interesting stuff that we're going to get into in this article here. It gets more interesting as it goes along, actually. What our Treasury Secretary is hinting at is bigger than anything we could imagine and is almost doomsday scenario for the United States being planned out by President Obama and his administration. How serious is the threat? Well, it is serious enough that the NSA, Department of Homeland Security, and the federal government to put contingency plans in place, completely annexing 16 states and redrawing the federal United States map. The federal government has put into place contingency plans for, if this happens, implementing a virtual government shutdown of 16 states. Which 16 states? Well, that depends on the map, as two are in play. Two maps, meaning one shuts down the biggest welfare states, because that would cause a lot of pain, shutting down the welfare states, the ones that have tons of people on food stamps and so on. The other redraws the map of the Civil War. Is your state on the map to be annexed? I'm going to show you that map larger here in just a moment. It says this map shows the biggest TANF, TAFT, or federal funds to low-income family recipients. This is one of the biggest drains on the government borrowing from the Social Security and Medicare tax income that is received since 1976 reform. Dark blue states indicate the biggest percentage per population that receive these funds. Okay, I'm going to show you that map now. Hold on just a second here. So the darker the blue is, the more welfare state that it is. Okay, like California at 80%. My old home state of South Carolina only down at 16%, which is surprising that they're lower like that. State that I've lived in plenty of times, Idaho at 6%. And so not really a welfare state there. That's cool. But your dark states like Maine, down through the Northeast, of course, you know, where the New World Order has their control grid at, has everybody on welfare. And of course, West Coast California, even around through Arizona and so on, and up in Washington State, and even unfortunately Alaska is in a pretty bad condition. So these are the darker states, or the states that they're talking about that would potentially be shut down all federal funding, right? So now let's continue on with this article here. It says, according to CNBC and the National Council of State Legislators, the top 15 states to be victims of Obama's government shutdowns to punish the people would be Oregon, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Rhode Island, Indiana, New Mexico, Washington, Minnesota, New York, District of Columbia, not a state but one of the highest per capita welfare recipients. Vermont, yeah, it's not a state, it's owned by the British Crown. Vermont, Massachusetts, Tennessee, Maine, California. The 16th state could be a choice from any of the darker blue states like Virginia, Florida, Alaska. This could also be drawn up by the 2012 census of households' median income, which would pretty much redraw some old battle lines and old wounds of our nation. This list would include from lowest to highest Mississippi, West Virginia, Arkansas, Kentucky, Alabama, Tennessee, Louisiana, South Carolina, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Idaho, North Carolina, Montana, Florida, Missouri, and Ohio. Basically, the breadbasket of America. It would be in agriculture versus industry. The rest of the southern states are not far behind on that list. We can record government interference with the farm industry and the recent flooding, recent droughts, weather manipulation, and natural occurrences for this gap. One missing from this list as a major player in the industry of the old Confederate states has a plan that makes this even bigger. And of course, they're talking about Texas. Texas Governor Rick Perry made it no secret since 2009 his feelings on the United States federal government and the republic collapsed what his feelings were. It is no secret that Texas is a big battleground state and one of the industry leaders with even a slot in the world economy. This year, the Attorney General of Texas, Greg Abbott, signed a contingency plan that would help Texas the Texas nationalist movement in the event of an economic collapse to restore the Republic of Texas to the full glory of the nation it once was. This has led to some serious debate with constitutional lawyers as if it was even possible since the Civil War. But Texas remains one state that is still classified as a republic. See, Obama tells us that we're a democracy, but if you say you pledge allegiance, you'll realize that you are supposed to be a republic by rule of law and not by mob rule, which is what democracy is. It says a republic and is one of the only states that can fly its flag at the same level as the U.S. flag. This prompted legislation in Oklahoma from the Oklahoma House and the Senate and was signed off on by Governor Mary Fallin, Republican, to also leave the state in the event of a catastrophe. It seems that Oklahoma would join its sister state in leaving, and they are on the list of the 16 states that would be cut if President Obama does this by wealth. Louisiana is flirting with the idea See, Louisiana's talked about seceding from the Union. There was a big a petition on the White House website at one point. They had the highest numbers with Texas there of wanting to secede from the Union. A lot of their people signed that petition. It says parts of Colorado, considering that they have had the first recall election and replaced legislators for the first time in history during a term. And New Mexico are also lining up with the idea. Could we see the rise of the Republic of Texas again? How credible is the threat? Well, there are several things that makes this doomsday scenario possible. Number one, the government already has the contingency plan in place, and President Obama signed off on the executive order already. We have the truckers shutting down the dollar on October 11th through the 13th, which is, if you're not aware of the trucker thing there, from October 11th to the 13th, truckers are going to roll on Washington, D.C. and shut down the streets, and claims are going to try to make some arrests of congressmen and so on. So that should be very interesting. And then to get their attention and demand impeachment, of course, of President Obama, which I would highly support. We have the banks threatening to follow suit in retaliation, instant market flux, and maybe market crash. Might be a good time to have your cash in your hand, people. The powers that be stand to make money on this. In fact, they are rooting for it, or rooting for it, whatever. It says it is piling into a very specific global market, says Kareem, author of the best-selling book, Where in the World Should I Invest? Certain investors will get rich off of this event. It happens in every crisis, dating as far back as the Depression. You just need to know where to put your money. And that is true. And of course, they're not going to do anything without making money and getting a political gain out of it. And so understanding as I'm reading this article that in fact this is a plan. They have a plan to do something. If they continue with this shutdown and we get another 11 days here, or actually at this point another 9 days, we could have it could get very interesting. So cash ain't worth much, but I'd have it in my hand instead of sitting in a bank at this point. Next, the Blaze reported that we were writing this article that Speaker John Boehner now states that if President Obama continues to negotiate, that we will default on the national debt. And they've got a video here that you can watch if you want to. I'm not going to play it here. I could care less what that idiot has to say, really, to be quite honest. It is bad enough to get the Speaker Boehner to cuss in another speech directly to the White House of, this is not some damn game. Yeah, this is a game. This is a stage. It's a game. And they're telling you it's not a game because anytime they tell you anything, they mean the opposite. Here's the situation in a nutshell. If President Obama comes to the table and negotiates, then we raise the debt ceiling. Of course, this last part here is stating what he stated. I'm not even going to read it, other than just give you a little quick review here of that. What we're watching unfold here is literally a financial false flag that they may pull. And they may move ahead with shutting down states and cutting off, because we've already seen they're willing to do these kinds of things. Shutting down war memorials, shutting down WIC, shutting down burial services for soldiers. They're willing to do all these things. They want to cause us pain because they want us to submit. Now the question is, are you going to submit? Are you going to tough it out and say, screw y'all guys, shut her down? Or are you going to submit? And are you going to go along and consent with the continued raising of this debt ceiling? Or do we call their bluff and deal with it? It's coming sooner or later. When are you ready? When are we going to finally stand up to these idiots and let them know we don't need them? Because see, that's the whole key, is that you have to need them. You have to want them. We don't need and we don't want them. Can I get an amen?